Aaron Blake, 38, had once served as a combat medic during the Fallujah operation. 5 years earlier, he had suffered severe burns while rescuing a fellow Marine from a Humvee engulfed in flames after an IED blast. The explosion had permanently scarred half of his face and neck, a visible map of agony etched into his skin. After receiving a medical discharge, Aaron withdrew from military circles, steering clear of veterans' gatherings and reunions that might have offered support. He relocated to a quiet riverside community, far from familiar faces, and began working as a server at the Riverside Diner, a small, modest spot where he could earn a decent wage while limiting his interactions. Every day he bore the stares, the murmurs, the parents instinctively pulling their children closer when he approached their booths. He developed a routine. Approach from the right, the side less marred, speak minimally, serve with care, and retreat. The manager, Mike, had initially hesitated to assign him front-of-house duties, suggesting kitchen work instead. But Aaron had insisted. He wouldn't hide in the back. That particular Saturday afternoon, Aaron was carrying a tray of beverages when he heard giggles behind him. A group of local teens were nudging each other, making quiet jokes. One boy, around 16, raised his phone under the guise of taking a selfie, but angled it to catch Aaron's profile. "Check this out," the teen whispered, "straight out of a horror flick." Aaron heard it all. Since the blast, his hearing had sharpened, almost making up for the rest. He kept moving, expression unreadable, his grip on the tray firm despite the burn of familiar shame rising in his chest. At a booth nearby sat Randall Pierce, a retired Army sergeant, dining with his teenage son, Liam. Randall had been mid-sentence explaining the college admissions process when he noticed Aaron delivering water to the table beside theirs. As the server reached across, his sleeve slipped back slightly, revealing part of a unique tattoo on his forearm. Randall's fork paused in midair. That ink, a medic's cross entwined with an unmistakable unit code, belonged to the 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, his own unit for Fallujah. His eyes shifted to Aaron's scarred face, looking past the damage, and recognition hit like a punch to the chest. "Dad?" Liam asked, catching his father's stunned expression. "What is it?" Randall watched as his son and his son's friends continued to laugh at Aaron, snapping another photo when the waiter turned his back. Without hesitation, Randall reached across the table and grabbed his son's wrists, pressing the phone down. "Liam," he said, his voice tight and low, "you just did the most shameful thing I've ever seen you do." "It's just a photo, Dad, for laughs." Randall's eyes didn't leave Aaron's fading figure. "That man isn't who you think he is. Not even close. If you ever cared about being decent, sit here. Stay put." Randall had served for 18 years before retiring. He'd been a platoon sergeant during the same campaign in which Aaron had worked as a medic. Though they'd belonged to different squads, Randall knew the tales everyone did. They called him Doc, the medic who carried 4 wounded soldiers through gunfire, the same young corpsman who, despite suffering horrific burns in the vehicle explosion, had gone back repeatedly to pull out his injured comrades. The last man he'd saved had been Lieutenant Caleb Pierce, Randall's oldest son. Caleb had lived because of that medic. Though he now limped, he'd survived. And now, unbelievably, that same man was silently bussing tables at a small-town diner while teenagers laughed at his scars. "Give me your phone," Randall said to Liam, with a voice that left no room for protest. "Dad, come on, we were just... now." Reluctantly, Liam handed the phone over. Randall deleted the pictures, stood up quickly, and headed toward the front counter where a middle-aged, balding man was reviewing receipts. "Excuse me," Randall said. "The server with the burns, may I speak with him privately?" The manager, Mike, looked a little uneasy. "Aaron's still on his shift. Was something wrong with your meal?" "No problem at all. I just need to thank him for something from years ago." Mike disappeared into the kitchen and returned moments later, his expression strained. "He says he doesn't want to talk. He's private about his background." Randall nodded. He understood. Men who had seen the things Aaron had usually chose privacy over recognition. He scribbled something on a napkin, his name and number. "Give this to him. Tell him it's from Lieutenant Pierce's father. He'll know what that means." Later that night, Randall sat at his computer, staring at the comment box of a private Facebook group for Iraq war vets. His fingers hovered briefly before he started typing. Send to him. Today, I saw a hero mocked while wearing an apron. Doc, the combat medic who saved my son and others during the Fallujah assault, is now waiting tables in my town, enduring shame for the scars he earned saving lives. What does it say about us if we can't recognize a sacrifice standing in front of us? By midnight, the post had been shared 197 times in veteran groups. By dawn, thousands of current and former service members across 3 states had read it. Meanwhile, Liam's friends had already posted the photo of Aaron with mocking captions, not knowing what was coming. Within hours, their posts were bombarded with replies from military members, calling out the disrespect and demanding apologies. "That's combat medic Aaron Blake," one person wrote. "You're mocking a man who saved more lives in one firefight than you'll influence your whole life." Aaron remained unaware of the growing ripple. He showed up for his Sunday morning shift, head low, movements precise as always. But the atmosphere felt different. Customers looked at him not with fear or disgust, but with a kind of quiet recognition. That afternoon, a letter arrived at the diner. It was simply addressed to Doc Blake. Inside was a handwritten note. "You carried me 2 kilometers under gunfire when both my legs were crushed. If you're washing dishes, I'll mop floors. Some debts can't be paid, from a forever grateful Marine." The manager gently placed the letter in the break room. His entire view of his reserved employee had shifted within hours. Type unfair if you believe nobody should be shamed for the scars they carry in the line of duty. Monday morning brought something unheard of to the Riverside Diner. By 7 a.m., a dozen men and women in full military dress sat quietly at scattered tables. Each of them placed a small card in front of their drinks that simply read, "Thank you, Doc." By 8 o'clock, the number had doubled. The diner, usually quiet, would never be the same. Monday mornings carried a different rhythm. The diner filled quietly with Marines, Army, and Navy service members. Each sat upright, speaking in calm, respectful voices. They waited. Aaron arrived at 8:30 for his shift, unaware of what was happening. He froze at the doorway, eyes scanning the room full of uniforms. His first instinct was to leave, to walk out and avoid the spotlight. But something inside him stopped his feet. Mike stepped over, nervous. "Aaron, they're here for you. I didn't realize." His voice cracked. "I didn't know who you were." Aaron moved toward the break room on autopilot, tied on his apron, and began his routine. His hands shook slightly as he poured water, but his face stayed neutral. When he stepped toward the first table, a gunnery sergeant stood, snapping a crisp salute. "Doc Blake," the man said, voice carrying through the now silent room. "Thank you for not leaving anyone behind that night." Aaron stood still, gripping the pitcher tightly. After a few seconds, he extended his hand and shook the sergeants. One by one, more veterans came forward, some from units he'd once worked alongside, others strangers showing solidarity. A woman in navy blues handed him a small velvet box. Inside was a Purple Heart. It had belonged to her father, one of the men Aaron had helped evacuate. He had died the previous year from complications due to his injuries. "He asked me to return this to you if I ever found you," she said gently. "He said you were the real hero of Fallujah." By late morning, news crews gathered outside. Mike, who days earlier had suggested Aaron work fewer public shifts because his appearance made customers uneasy, now stood before cameras, praising the man he once underestimated. Randall Pierce arrived next, bringing both sons Liam and Lieutenant Caleb Pierce. Caleb walked with a noticeable limp. He made his way straight to Aaron. "You might not remember me," Caleb said. "Third vehicle in the convoy," Aaron answered softly. "Broken femur and shrapnel in the lower spine. You kept trying to stand even with the leg fracture." The two embraced, with camera flashes catching the moment. Caleb turned to his younger brother. "Liam has something to say." The teen who had once mocked Aaron now stood awkwardly, face red. "I'm sorry," he said, barely audible. "I didn't know. I was being ignorant. There's no excuse." Aaron studied his face. "I forgive you," he said quietly. Just remember, we don't choose how we get injured, but we do choose how we treat people afterward. By mid-afternoon, the mocking photos had vanished, replaced with new ones. Aaron among veterans. Aaron shaking Caleb's hand. Aaron quietly continuing his shift dignity in every action. Mike approached during a lull. Aaron, I owe you an apology. When folks complained about how you looked, I should have defended you. Instead, I asked you to stay out of sight. That was wrong. Aaron nodded and accepted it. Before the diner closed, Mike taped up a news sign at the entrance. Proud to have American heroes on our team. Medal of Honor's nominee Aaron Blake serves here. As Aaron wiped down the tables that evening, Randall lingered nearby. Why here? He asked. With your history, you could be doing anything VA work. Government positions. Aaron thought for a second. Because here, I'm just Aaron. Not a sad tale, not a headline, not a symbol of a nightmare. Just a guy doing a job. He paused. At least I was. Randall nodded slowly. Sometimes the burden of heroism was one only a few truly understood. The next morning, Riverside Diner opened to a line wrapped around the block. Veterans, military families, civilians all waiting patiently for a chance to shake Aaron's hand or simply be served by him. Even the teens who'd mocked him showed up, quietly handing out flyers. The paper read, "Fundraiser for Wounded Warriors." Have you ever done the right thing when everyone else looked away? Your story matters. A month later, Aaron received a formal envelope from the Pentagon. It invited him to a ceremony honoring frontline medics. The letter also mentioned the potential for a Medal of Honor previously stalled by bureaucracy. Aaron folded the letter and tucked it into his locker. You're not going? Mike asked when Aaron shared the news. I'm good right here, Aaron said. I don't need a medal or a stage, just normal days where people see me, not the damage. The diner had changed. Customers who once asked for a different server now requested Aaron specifically. Vets still came, but respected his preference to be treated like any other worker, not like a symbol. One Tuesday morning, Aaron found a handwritten card left neatly on his usual break room seat. Your scars are medals we can't wear for you. It wasn't signed, but he recognized the handwriting Liam's. Looking out through the service window, he spotted Liam and his classmates at a table not filming him, but taking notes. An off-duty paramedic stood nearby, teaching basic first aid. Mike had donated the space for weekly classes, inspired by Aaron's example. Seemed like the least we could do, Mike had said. Aaron watched them wrap tourniquets and practice wound pressure, the same techniques he'd used under fire. Something stirred in him, a sense that maybe it wasn't so bad to be seen after all. Scars and all. Honor isn't found in medals or titles. It lives in those who bear wounds without bitterness. Sometimes the quiet man clearing tables once held someone's final breath in his hands. Have you ever been misjudged based on how you look? Share your story, because your voice deserves respect too. Subscribe to Real Storyline for more powerful true stories where quiet dignity, bravery, and truth finally get seen. Dad, look at that waiter's face. Gross, right? A teen lifted his phone, snapping a stealthy photo. At the nearby table, laughter bubbled. The waiter only lowered his gaze, calmly wiping spilled coffee. Someone muttered, probably a gas fire or something. But the father stiffened. He saw what others missed, a faded tattoo below the collar, one he knew too well. It belonged to a Special Forces unit. Type unfair if you believe mocking others for their scars is always wrong, or